Okay, so good morning, everyone. All of you are familiar with Anjana's work. So I will start first not with a question for her, but with Rita Roy. This is a very unusual book that she's written, and she changes her genres with equal ease for each genre. So, Rita, would you introduce the man to us, the man behind the house, the press built, the man behind Indian Press? Because I certainly will know about it. So I think most people probably don't know about it.
True. So, Chintamani started his working life as a dispatch clerk at the age of 12 in the office of the Pioneer, where Rudyard Kipling, his father, John Lovewood Kipling, also worked. At the time, so short was Chintamani that he could not reach the ledger of dispatches, which was kept on a tall desk, and chose to do his work sitting on the floor instead. A curious boy, Chintamani would often wander into the printing room and was fascinated by the world of machines and type. From starting out as a dispatch clerk, he became a compositor, arranging and rearranging the type for each page set up. Gradually, he became a favorite of those he worked with because he was clever and industrious. After 7 years of honing his skills, he decided to strike out on his own. The Indian Press, as Chintamani Ghosh named it, to set it apart from all the British-run presses, was started in 1884. With funding from a friend, Ghosh bought a second-hand Crown hand press with accessories. And since he could not afford an assistant, he did the printing himself in the evening after finishing his day job as a clerk at the Met Department. Within a year, Ghosh made a name for himself. One biographical sketch of Ghosh mentions that he was formally educated only up to class 9, but was instrumental in the universal spread of knowledge and education through his publications. Ghosh published Tagore's Gitanjali in 1910, for which Tagore won the Nobel Prize in 1913. Ghosh also began bringing the works of distinguished Hindi writers to the parde in beautifully bound form. Ghosh's publishing enterprise was fast-breaking in India, in British India, and marked the beginning of a host of other businesses too.
Thank you. Thank you, Rita. Okay, my first question to Anjana is going to be that after her first novel, Curses in Ivory, then Black Tongue, as I said, Conspiracy of Pawns, which was launched right here, her books for children, which are people by tigers and leopards and the likes, her travel writing, her collections of poetry, her work for Rita Porter's Bills. What made you want to write The House the Press Built? And also, what were the challenges you faced?
Okay. At some point, I got put onto this cousins group, which was all the Allahabad cousins. Chintamani Ghosh and Chireti is my great-grandfather. And I was born in that cousin in Allahabad because my mother said, went to Gumamar wedding talking, deliver for dates. So I had that nick. And this cousins group was whatever, talking stories, Chintamani Ghosh, anecdotes about the house. So I said, look, have you ever thought of putting these anecdotes together? Because it seems to me nobody really knows about this. So somebody needs to know something about it. The result was I picked out all the anecdotes, I put them together. I squabbled for more anecdotes. Unfortunately, I only had 90,000 words worth of anecdotes, which doesn't make for a book. Anyway, I brought it up to 40,000 by research and various other things. And finally, I was lucky enough that Rupa to bring it out.
I think those other things are, and I'm saying this because a lot of you know it's the ease with which her language flows, the descriptive parts. And I have to tell you, since she brought up her birth in Allahabad, she's a winter baby. She was a winter baby. And the mother, Alukama, she didn't know what to do to keep this baby warm in the really biting cold of Allahabad. So she put her blankets and all on top of an unu. And it's a good thing, as she says, that she didn't become a tandoori baby. But as someone in this room said, who shall not be named, it kind of addled her brains, possibly. Us will testify to that. Okay. Now to go back to Chintamani Bose, she was just 30 years old when he set up the India Press in 1884. That figure, that date is quite daunting when you think of the times and when all this was happening. And Tagore's classic Gitanjali was printed by them in just 5 days. The bard had said, I'm giving you 7 days, I have to have it. But they even beat this deadline. Now, when the Vishwabharati Press was set up, Tagore asked awkwardly, requested Chintamani Bose for the copyright he held on Tagore's works. And he agreed immediately for the consideration of just 1 rupee, a token consideration. Those were different times. And Tagore was ever grateful. And Chintamani told his son, Otto, they had wonderful names. I feel that you'll maybe hear about the names later. He said, I haven't just given away my rights. I haven't given away something. I've contributed to the nation. I've contributed something permanent to the nation. So I wanted to ask Abhijit, because this is an area of expertise with it. Take us back into that absolutely fascinating time of publishing and printing. And, you know, the challenges, the machines, the processes. We read about the Calcutta India Press, photogravure. So, you know, all the processes. And was India Press a trendsetter? Did a backbreaker? Oh.
Right. So, this is period in Indian history, 1880s, the birth of nationalism, just about incipient nationalism. And part of this, obviously, is printing. Part of this program of modernity is printing plays a very important role, especially through periodicals and other kinds of F1 print. Now, and this is also the time when so you have some very important publishers, Nawal Kishore Briss, for instance, in Lucknow, and so on and forth, who absolutely play the role of nation builders in many ways, and of course in Bengal. But Allahabad is remarkable because it was also the site of Bengali diaspora effect. One of the first ever book in Bengali and in, I suppose, in any South Asian language, which had a woman's name as an author, was written by a inhabitant of Allahabad, Krishna Kamini Devi in 1826. She was the first author, first woman whose name actually appears as an author in print. So there is a tremendous history of letters with which Allahabad is associated. And the remarkable thing about India Press is that it's still a going concern, and one can still see what it did because the archive of India Press is very well preserved. Now, this is a problem for the lack of publishers' archives, a problem for those of us who try to do any kind of publishing history. In the West, I mean, if you look at publishers like Macmillan or Petley or Chatterjee Vendors, they've all deposited their archives with depositories of record. But this is not the case of it. In India, where most publishing houses have sold off their papers to the friendly neighborhood Raddiwala, or other forces are unnaturally chosen against them. So it's very, very difficult to sort of extrapolate a history and this invisible history of publishing in the case of India, except, and the one exception is this particular press. So there was a team from Dadapur who went to see the press, and 2 years ago, unfortunately, I felt I could go. Professor Shukanda Chaudhary were at a week there. very enthusiastically reported on what was left, which is a remarkable treasure trove of all kinds of publishing. I mean, periodicals, it can be periodicals, Tagore's work, children's books, illustrated children's books. And illustration was a very strong point. You were mentioning photogravarium, that Calcutta Press, they printed cutting edge color supplements like Hindustan Pictorial, or which some examples still remain at the Calcutta office, and which set a very high watermark for a certain kind of color printing. And the other sort of pioneer in color printing in Bengal was the the Ray family, with Mukeshwar and Trubkumar, who were printing Shombesh and other at the Ure Press with. And you can see that this press, both the UA Press Calcutta and Sitamomin Bosch's press, were pioneers in what they were doing. And also they were publishing both in Hindi and Bengali, publishing translations. For instance, one of the things we were remarkably surprised to see was that the Bengali pulp novels of Toshu Momon were published in Hindi by this press. I mean, we don't even know about this, of course. There is a very rich tradition of Bengali policy translated it to Indian, other Indian language, which is a favor which we have not returned. But that is another matter entirely. It's a pet peeve of mine, but we'll not go in that direction. But if you look at the apprenticeship of Tilamoni Bosch learning and the Pioneer Press, and then sort of setting up publishing house of your own, it is remarkable in every possible way. And it was also a very successful press. You can even start a press and it can go under, or in many cases, if you are publishing something which is not to the liking of the Raj, and gradually by the 1890s and 1910s, books which are deep seditious are beginning to come under the scabbard. Till the 1890s, there wasn't really much censorship to speak of.
And they must have been hugely successful, because look at the business empire.
Absolutely.
That they set up.
I mean, till the nationalization of textbooks in the 1980s in UP, I suspect much of the textbooks in Uttar Pradesh was supplied by, or earlier it would be United Provinces, it was supplied by this particular press. Some mention of that. So you are looking at a press which actually straddled the widest possible range of genres, languages. And it's hard to think of any other comparable entity in India. I mean, there may be a few which it may be in the some in Bengali, but not a press which dealt in so many genres. There were presses which sort of specified in certain kinds. So for example, in Bengali, you had Tek Shaikh Kabuti in his children's works and so forth. But to do all of this over such a wide range and such a long time, we're looking at like 3 centuries. Yes, remarkable.
You were going to read something about Tagore later. Do that now, please. Yeah, sure. And I just wanted to mention, while she's looking for that the Indian press, the spin-offs were carpets, perfumery, sugar mill, a sugar factory. There are wonderful stories about the children and the sugar factory, especially the one about the piano. I love that. And they had a shopping boom, a ball. It was amazing. So,
Tagore was certainly in Allahabad while his Gitanjali was being published. He had given Chintamani Ghosh a 7-day deadline to bring out the book in 14 formats. He planned to be in Allahabad only for a week and was a guest in the house of Babu Pyarelal Banerjee, who later became Chief Advocate of Uttar Pradesh. Since this was the first request the poet had made to the Indian press in person, Ghosh worked hard to oblige, and with his print team on duty round the clock in shifts. The book was brought out in 5 days, and 5 copies were presented to Gurudev, each in a different cloth finding. It was an impressive feat at a time when books were printed by hand, and Tagore was moved by the effort and artistry that had gone into the work. As a token of thanks, the next day the poet drove down in a horse-drawn phaeton to visit Ghoshbari, and it was on that occasion that he sang one of the first songs from Gitanjali in his unforgettable voice.
thank you. but he recreated a really fascinating old-time charm and world. Children and grandchildren growing up in the security of a joint family, something which most people don't know about today. And he written really wonderfully about that, evocatively about that. And these children studied together, they ate together, they played pranks together. There were outings to the cinema, there were picnics, expeditions, something that is so redolent of that time, of the olden days. And Rita's going to read something about the joint family. I just wanted to say that there's one line especially that I want to say that is so, so it just evokes the right feeling about a joint family. She writes, the house, that's the Goshwari, the house that the press built, the house was like a box of sweets, brimming with affectionate relatives. I think that is so wonderful. Somebody is there to always look out for you. You think you're getting away with mischief because your parents aren't watching out for you, but somebody else gives you a smack. Somebody else facts you and comforts you. It's lovely. Yes, that's it. Okay.
For those who grow up in the house, childhood was a blissful experience. The joy of living in a joint family came from the sense of security it provided, a feeling of never being alone, with loved ones always nearby, ready with a treat, a hug, or a scolding, depending on the situation. The house was like a box of sweets, as you said, brimming with affectionate relatives, a myriad of paternal uncles and aunts, kakas, jathas, and fishimas, and the equally cherished maternal uncles and aunts, mamas and mashis. They had enduring nicknames like Chocolate Pishi, Achar Didu, the granny who crafted tangy chaklis, Ghuri Jethu, the uncle who could magically fish out a kite when needed, Paula Jethu, whose favorite fruit was the banana, though that liking was not necessarily shared by the Chindu, and Hath Jethu. Perhaps today's equivalent would be the uncle who takes the children out for a treat to the nearest Hayat.
Which I have no idea what it is, and I have a feeling Bunty doesn't know.
I thought it was the heart.
Heart. So did I. I very confidently told you it's heart. The entire book is written with, it's such a warm, sepia-tinted remembrance of joint family empires and life. And I'm going to ask you to just tell us a bit more about it, the incidents. There's so much of it, so choose from.
There is a hell of a lot.
Now, you go little things like the sleeping on the chairlace, the roof, the going from a building to building. You can going
Panics and drowning and pretending to swim when you could. There were things like that and Abulki.
Yeah.
Then there was all the mischief. Children would persuade their feeding man to stop outside the confectionery. And they would quickly go running and pick sweets off to the belt. And nobody got to know about this because they were eating home. Unfortunately, one of the children had to break for cooked on a particularly hard toffee or something. So she gave my cook with a broken pick. And there was a furor. They wanted to know how it happened, what happened. And then the whole story came out, and then they began going with confection. So that was stopped. There was also this is actually my direct Mashri, who hated her piano at the convert stop. And she chewed her gum and smeared sticky chewing gum over the piano keys. And he ran away.
On a number of keys, like.
Yeah. And then the months came, they found the piano because he played. Now, my aunt was very innocently hooked. Nobody suspected. She didn't get caught, but piano lessons were all desired.
Thank God she didn't try to get that.
No, she didn't. She decided it might be better song.
Okay, to get back to something more serious, Alka, they didn't stop, the Indian press didn't stop publishing Hindi translations of Tagore, just as they published very notable poets and novelists, Hindi poets and novelists, including briefly Premchand. And something that we keep writing about, something again that I didn't know about, I think most people don't, is their role uh, in that Hindustani language, what was known as Hindustani language, and which became today's Hindi. So expand on those.
Yeah, I was working on an anthology of, publications of magazines, and it was a Tagore University project within the department. And actually, it was quite a discovery for us, for me, that so many Bengalis have kind of, really shaped Hindi into what it is today. I mean, the Hindi that we speak today, the Hindi that, and which I write today, it was kind of minted by Chintamani Ghosh. A Bengali in Allahabad who was, he published Saraswati, the magazine, in 1900. And he employed Mahavir Prasad Dwivedi as an editor, who was, in fact, when we were in class 9, there was a chapter of Mahavir Prasad Dwivedi, that how he coined, kind of instructed everybody who was writing for the magazine and write. India writer to Saraswati was a big deal thing. So I felt, Arjuna told me that I must come for this thing. So I felt that as a Hindi writer, I must pay my tribute to Chintamani first. Of course, you've done that anthology and written about it at length. And it was because, you see, the Hindi at that time was, Bhartetu Harishchandra had written in 1885, Hindi Nai Chalu Mein Thar. So you see, Hindi was being coined because it was a mixture of Hindustani, Urdu, and the Karim Boli that we know of. And it was not really, a language for expressing, to write a story in it or write a poem in it. So it was very, very less, the way, what would write in this language. So it was like a mint where Hindi was minted. And actually all big Hindi writers are somewhat, Nirala, Premchand, of course, and Mahavir Prasad Dwivedi. He encouraged all Hindi writers to write in the language, so it was kind of a big enterprise, which really, it left a legacy, which is so much there today.
Anjana, you've written about so much that so many of us can relate to. The piano, vocal, music, dancing lessons, the homemade achars, chutneys, and amsas that Kikar was seeing all the time, children, and the swinging lessons in the tank. Tadpoles swam into their mouths, which is really revolting. Affects so much, but there are weddings, the preparation for weddings, food, which is so important, the way where they celebrated different festivals, and journeys, strange journeys. I have to read this to you because it is fascinating. And many of you will remember this. I certainly do. When they eat, this is the group of children in the family traveling with the aunt for a wedding.
Yeah, you have to add that she's only Ghosha 10 children. Has a Because to figure out how many children there are not be were.
Okay. So when they finally arrived at Jabalpur station and the battalion started descending from the train, one by one, everyone on the platform gaped. To the English bystanders unfamiliar with the family, it must have looked like some kind of chaotic African safari. 17 pieces of luggage, if not more, including the potties for the smaller children. most people got tired of daunting. And she writes about something that I remember so well because we used to have a place in Shimultada, have friends in Deoghar, Joshidi, Giridi, Madhupur. We traveled exactly like this, Boydon and everything. And there was this contraption, wooden, into which you fitted a muddy shorai to keep the water full. I've still not understood the need for traveling with that really difficult contraption. I mean, it's like you couldn't buy a shorai locally and just keep your water in it. So, uh, but tell us about some of your favorite incidents that happened. You've already mentioned some, but tell us.
I could tell you about Sister Nicodemus.
Yes,
Oh,
and the wonderful wife.
as a wife. Yes. For her birthday, the children decided to keep her Rashgullas made in the house. And, and Sister Nicodemus was delighted with the Rashgullas. And she bit into it. She said, "Oh, the wine is so lovely." She managed to syrup, but she put it rest. And they ordered Nikki in the Iverbacks for a penny. They would go to school earlier in a tin box, something, well, it's a sort of a tin carried on wheels. And this occasionally caused chaos because it would get if the wheels were to a ditch, the box would fall over. The children would have to be rescued. That there was chaos on that. And Chitamani, which was forever worried about where in my eldest granddaughter, why is she not come? Shona. And ultimately he said she's going to study at home and not sending her to school and take a box. So that was not okay. Then the children were allowed to give their favorite books the nuns. Okay. And in this particular case, my mother decided to take the original version of Sir Richard Burton's Arabian Nights, which, if you are aware of it, is
Rather inappropriate.
very inappropriate Kapa Sutra type version of the Arabian Nights. And my mother refused to show it to anybody. So then one of the elder cousins said, "What are we carrying?" And there was a tug of war in that carriage with the saying the school. Ultimately, the book is confiscated, and my mother was stripped with tears. Oh, she couldn't leave it.
And they also thought of getting Shona married to
Upendra Kishore, but that was
no, the son.
a scholarship prize. Take a passion, but that was gossip. Yeah. Oh, so we would. I said that gossip come up with because Kushasi was not brown wood,
I know.
window wood.
Okay, Abhijit, back to you. You know, we'd read about the very expensive paper that was ordered from England, and there are other little nuggets. But what was printing like in those days? What was the quality of printing? Also, what kind of role did these printing presses, like Indians, the Indian press, play in the nationalist freedom struggle?
Okay, that's a very broad question to answer, but the first part is more easily answered. So papers, we never really manufactured good paper. Even today, if you look at mind printing, most of the paper comes from outside India. I mean that's why
Really devastating.
TC makes good paper, but if you're looking for high quality printing, is still dependent on.
So they didn't use to put them.
We had Titagarh paper mills, but historically India has not been. I mean, handmade paper, yes, but if you're looking for paper, particularly for printing, color illustrations or art, you are dependent on the supply chain from abroad, and which was again subject to interruptions such as the Great War. So, as I mentioned there in 1914, when the supply of paper dries up, War II, he put. Well, that's fascinating. There could be a fascinating history of how, of course, there's local paper as well, with which you can print textbooks at cheaper. But if you're printing high-end stuff, then you really have to import paper. As I said, this is still the story, and that's why when there's a war in Ukraine or on Strait, is that the paper price goes up, particularly almost twice a day. I mean, and those who are in the printing industry sort of routinely bemoan this. Now, but good printing that took place in the early decades of the 20th century before the Great War. Let's say in Calcutta was the Raichoudhury family. They were also pioneers in printing processes. For example, Sukumar and Ubindru, who was just mentioned, were pioneers of the half-tone process of printing images. So after is the sort of forebear of the pixel, where you have a number of dots. More the number of dots, the better the quality. And if you remember newspapers from the 1960s and 70s, you remember after dating where there's a kind of black and white photograph with multiple dots. So that was Sukumara and Upendra were both pioneers in that. So you're also looking at
Exertajit threads, it was continued. There are three kinds of time faces.
yes, the Ray Visa,
Ray Roman, Ray
Visa, Daphnis. So there is a sort of not just printing, good printing, but also research in printing, which was taking place. And I'm not sure whether if you look at the archives of the print India Press, we might also find instances of that. I mean, for that, you need to look very closely at the business documents, the everyday transactions of the press in order to figure out what kind of, let's say, paper was being used, what kind of binding, where were these bound, for instance. It's not enough to print. You also have to have a bindery. Did they have a bindery in within that? So there were master binders that would bind. What was the kind of binding that were doing? All of these associated questions, which again about the archive will tell. But the second question about nationalism, about the rise of freedom movement at printing, that's sort of more. I mean, you have Modern Review and Prabhashu, which will be printed from Rananda Bandhavata is a periodic to be printed from the Indian press, and they played a very important role in articulating a certain kind of the aspiration for freedom. But equally, you could also think about other printing presses which were more precarious, which came under the direct notice of the Raj. So you could sort of list a number of printing presses which were either banned or which were either censored in various ways. So think of, if you were from Chandanagar, you would think of the Prabortok press, which was set up by Motilal Shri. There's a range of stuff. And also there were presses in princely states which was slightly beyond the jurisdiction of the Raj. I think so these were also places where wood pricks, Saprasista, in that smuggled double landings with the. And the last point, sorry, I don't want to get carried away by this, but much of the seditious, quote-unquote, seditious critique which was happening was actually taking place outside. It was taking place at places like Geneva, in Marseille. Manorendranath Roy, M.N. Roy was printing Frontier, or in the Gadarbadi in North America. So there was a sort of stream of pan literature which was published outside India, and which was sort of coming in through various routes, such as Laskar port ships, because we couldn't set them by post, because there was something called the Indian Sea Customs Act, where they could open your post and see whether you were carried, whether it's automatic. So there's a fascinating history of that as well, which yet needs to be written, studied.
Okay, to come back to food, this book is like a veritable Middle East. So there were 3 kitchens, one for vegetarian, one non-vegetarian, and one dedicated entirely to sweets. It had to be by God. And there was Amun Didi, unchallenged authority. She was a bar that nobody could challenge, but she could also turn out delights like nobody else could. And she was very sweet to the little ones, very impulsive. And there's so much food in this. It's amazing. There was the experiment with the Ansama, who was European style. Horrified women members. It didn't quite last. I have okay. But there are wonderful descriptions of the tiffin boxes, many layered. Luchi, chechki, poturi, the mangsho, I mean, it's a delight. And of course, caramel custard, very better to patch than that. So tell us about your favorite food after she reads it. favorite food wits in this book. Yeah. Okay. Right.
One of the uncles ordered in a khansama, a mail book, as a statement of liberalism and also because he felt that it could refresh the family's culinary repertoire. Every British household had one, he argued, whenever the family got together, and many of them had created customized dishes to suit their master's palate. Some people even claimed that the Sikh kebab took its name from Sheikh Shah Nawaz, the Khansama of Nawab Sirajuddaulah, and not from the skewer on which the kebabs were grilled. It was Shah Nawaz who had apparently created the dish for his master. And then, of course, Lord Bentinck, Dalhousie, and various governors general too had khansamas. Therefore, why should the cautious not have one? The children were agog with the prospect of yet another culinary tea and supported the suggestion on every occasion they could, despite being hushed by their respective parents.
Yeah, please.
You just have to drag it.
Drag it.
Yeah.
Okay. The food, yes, because I remember my grandmother, they keep pantuas, naan khatais, all of which she...
That was a real favorite.
Yeah. So she would do all...
And we used to get it. Remember? Mashima, by the way, Mashima, that's her grandmother, my Mashima. We would regularly get supplies when she came from Allahabad, and we looked forward to it. And the paras.
Yeah, all that shit would happen. But I have to say one thing, while the food is good, is every time I asked my aunts for different types of memories, I would get food, and more food. Which, believe me, right, memoir is kind of, trust me. I would find cooks called Pandey. I would find cooking lessons in the afternoon. Because the bomas and all went to sleep, so the young girls were kept. They were all pandits. Yeah, they were all pandits. This correct but however. And the Zivad at the caramel custard was taught by Firoz Gandhi's aunt family. Yeah. She had the cooking lessons, the finishing classes for whatever the nuns did not teach the girls. So they would all go to cook and they would come back yellow-handed because they were messing around with turmeric, and they all learned to do caramel custard. So which was...
That was very important in the
Parrots market. You had to demonstrate your caramel custard, when you were being duped. So that was that. And when the Indian Press had his burn columns, which exists, yeah, they would be wasting there. Yeah, very much there. They would be waiting for the huge pantuas which would come, which were called balls. And one of the relatives who would come running to us had the balls in a bucket. But there it was.
Okay. You mentioned Aika, you mentioned Saraswati. Yeah. Now, that was the leading a monthly national publication. And that was considered by many to be Chintamani Samuel's most outstanding contribution to Pakistan. And this leading national monthly of the early 20th century was, considered by people who wrote, writers, intellectuals, to be the thing, to be part of. It was a space where social and political tones and ideas were given a creative form. So tell us more about that, because that was so important. Also, this language that we know as Hindustan, which became Hindi later, and the Indian press's role in that.
Yeah, this is Saraswati's road. Yeah, it was not just the language that was being minted in Saraswati test, but also it was a space for ideas. Yeah, and of course, the nationalist thoughts that they made. So we basically encouraged, the writers, to come out with their ideas and find a space where they could be published, where they could write and find a language to express them, and also all the discussions that they had. Like she has written that how, there were meetings of various, people coming in, and Allahabad, in fact, being the center of, the Hindi bed kind of, and of literature. So I think, they created an atmosphere where it all survived. Like reading this, it was like, opening, those slats of, this key wooden windows and looking into, this house, which with not only is a, it went into several business venture. It was like a startup, this breast, and it will build the house and of all the anecdotes and everything. But at the same time, I think it was also, beating ground for the conversation and of course, and expressing that conversation into writing. So it encouraged, all kinds of thoughts to converge, to be assimilated, to be written about, and evolution of literature. So it created that atmosphere, that ecosystem, in which literature could, really, come out and survive. And all the important healthy writers were associated with success.
Thank you. Okay. But he's mentioned, I mean, we talked about, just touched upon the fact that there were so many businesses that the Indian press set up. But suddenly they all seemed to go down the tube. What was it? Was it family divisions, petty jealousies, strong, you know, other contenders to the businesses? Or just Bengali incompetence? I mean, the entire empire collapsed. Even the Indian press won.
I think that is a difficult question for answer. Let us not get there because I don't want to kill off like a. But we will not get
Want
there.
it bit of the press still.
This is a press publications, and incidentally they tried to revive Saraswati. I don't know how it's going because I occasionally politely ask, do you want some new? I think we can suggest an editor, and I think my customers are like, what is going on with the because there's one big function at my time, you one in that whole by two records. The rest do not. So the Sentai write, Sentai publish, and occasionally he's ever I was talking about. But again, I'm not made. And she's suddenly pushed us now, obscure reason, set up a trust for all the dealers. So therefore,
And the campy deity.
yeah, he owns the house. But so because the caste simulate the male is, women are not seriously supposed to be in the cigarette. But I did this. And tricky to write a biography of Gita Munigo. If I get to Allahabad, then do the research and get my dates, maybe gets right. But that again was depend on time, my cousins, what else. But yes, the press is still there. Press propagation. So we get books. Things work. That's all I see really say. Unless you would like to ask my top on mama any questions, always.
Wes, he was a major contributor to memories coming alive. He's 92 years old, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, question to everybody, to you. There were so many well-known people, so many well-known names in and out of that house. There was Rabindranath Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore came to wrap up things. There were the Nehrus. There were Firoz Gandhi's family. Shakilika was not known to, her family was not known to you.
Yeah. They were there.
Okay.
And the Wheeler family.
Wheeler.
Anarchy's son.
Wheeler
Family. I just asked them to come today. The Rocky, is the Wheeler.
But what is, what was the most fascinating from all that you learned? And what are the stories that were fascinating? Upe to Kishore children.
They two people working ended up big a week or I ended up big boxes. So we were not both. Yeah. I found the fact that Motilal Nehru came to study the house and figure out the blueprint. And his son who was Terrace Trona, because she was sitting on Motilal's lap. And they were things like that. But they were, and my program, my grandfather had a very bad cataract operation. The story is actually blinded. And having just finished doing my cataracts at really
Someone operated on the Buddha.
a German surgeon who operated on the Buddha, but literally be almost blind. So he wanted that conversation without to make up for what it has would. So Mother Mohan, Madhya and company would all come, and that is actually a melting pot of culture and association.
And what about Ramanand Chatterjee?
Yeah, Namaste.
Yeah, because Ramanand Chatterjee, again, he published Vishal Bharat from Kalbika. And that was also a very, very big, kind of a movement in me. In 1928, he started Vishal Bharat. And he was also connected to the Koshvas. He was always...
So she was public and up by
Yes, that's by Ramanand Chatterjee. Yeah.
then Nandalal Ghosh was there.
So many big names. That's another thing. The prince of artists, leading artists. That was a big part of Indian press.
And some of the children had art classes for big artists. And there was a great amount of rivalry happening between the different Mandadet. Who had the best art teacher or whose daughter was doing better.
There's something. I mean, there's we just mentioned the Wheeler Banerjee house or whatever was contiguous to the. So is that still there? Okay.
I think the anniversary of the price of gone. I tried to tell my cousin who runs publication it is his daughter married in Wheeler. I said yes, the books as a special soul.
Yeah, but those have now become
Select stories. Sort of multi.
It's the Banerjees bullets. So
there was a French guy first, Emile Moreau, who was part of that organization, and then the Hen Banerjee, I believe. Again, very little is known about Wheeler, which another.
to come to
Because I thought it would be interesting.
May I just make an episode here that this? Sorry.
No, I just wanted to tell Yi, since she's a keen gardener, make in the roses.
Yes.
It's medicine. Because the Wheelers were trying to get that secret because of the flower shows.
I know. She's related to my Talmud too. They have a site, so.
What I was about to say was that these papers need to be digitized very badly. But you see, we went, or some of us went to explore that possibility 2 years ago. There are various projects or various schemes which allow digitization of archival materials such as this. But it is very difficult to do it from Calcutta. We can apply for the funding from the British Library, for instance. They have something called the Endangered Archives Program, which it's very easy to get funds. But we spoke to Allahabad University's English department, but that needs to happen at the local level. It's not possible about Jadavpur University, which I'm part of, to actually do it from here. We can sort of do the fundraising and so on and forth, but that material which is lying there desperately needs to be digitized so that, there's a copy. Also, people can work on it, researchers as well as general public. When there's already a lot of academic writing, Sanjukta Botar, I think, has written a very detailed article on the Chindamani Court. So that again is something which I, just putting that idea that needs to be done either through the British Library or through other. It's not very expensive to digitize NAP accesses that. You need a setup and a couple of people to do that. So that's really needs to be done because it's one of the last, if not only remaining publishers archives they happen. So.
we have to end. We're coming to an end, but I have one question that I have to ask you. What was it about eggs? Why were hens not like duck eggs could be on the table, but if you had eggs, you had to sit on the floor. On the neck, we ate. It was a
Exactly. It was a Muslim introduction. Duck eggs were allowed. Oh, but take us of this, there was a problem. I remember my grandmother again. তুমি পুরীর বাক্সয় হাত দিয়েছ হাতো but I cannot even erect. And it was, and my uncle used to go get their Suraj Bali to smuggle omelets to the McDonald's. Kosa. They were so they
got is a little easier.
you see that it had to be smuggled. That none of the aunts of the grandmothers were to go.
Yes, chickens were not even allowed.
Just stick and eat this. Yeah.
Okay, any questions? A couple of questions. Anybody?
Seems.
Do you have the books on sale? Yes. Could we just borrow two just to take a photograph? Because we didn't formally launch the.
One question for the.
Thank you. I'll return it.
What is the 80 you're left with?
Sir.
The date of the war.
What is that? Is she? But this is a memoir. It's a memoir. You have to know about what that word was like, and hopefully you will understand that things can be done in many ways. But it's a memoir of what? Of sleek of thinking you. What I said, I scared. It's you lucky share what it's a memoir.
It's a memoir basically of the India's press and the house and the families, the joint family, those times, the way they lived.
It's also interesting how the first press, the scare in Bengal, and also in some other part of India. Yeah, it was that also with scarce the little people matrix of the matrix society and topic and see a speech. I'm not speech.
The first printing press was not in Bengal. It was in Goa, then in Tiruvananthapuram, and then it only came to Bengal in the 1780s. That's long before that. It crest up the school. So there's a non-history of printing. And again, I mean, it's a long story. So it's not kept here, but yes, Bengal was certainly one of the centers, but southern India
And the first Hindi newspaper was also published in Calcutta. Udat Arthar Press, 1826. The first Hindi newspaper.
Okay, could you just stand up, just please? Okay. No.
Udan Pardon. In the National Library Archives with the arrow vehicle.
Thank you.